Hi, and welcome back to the third session. I'm Gianluca Fiorelli, and today we are going to have a guest. Our guest is coming from the US, from the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. He is one of the senior, I would say, practitioner of SERP, and now is also presenting himself as an AI SEO or GEO expert, but it's not just a title. He is actually one of the most skilled person in this new field, or let's say new facets of SEO. So I'm really glad he accepted to be my guest. He is the CEO and founder of Search Influence. And if you go to his LinkedIn page, I think it's very easy to find also the link to the newsletter that he produce and publish every week, the Visibility Report, which is a very good one because it's mixed news about search and AI search, but also insights, its point of view from about this news, and also really smart idea about things that can be done. Our guest today is Will Scott. Hi, Will. How are you doing?
I'm great, Gianluca. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the shout out to the visibility report. I'm excited for that to come out each week, and I'm glad that people are finding it useful.
And indeed, it's useful. I mean, I think many of us, I'm subscribed to many newsletters, but at the end of the day, there are just a few that I regularly read every week, and one of them is yours.
That-
Others are obviously the latest one, also because it's a very well curated kind of newsletter. The other one is the Mark Williams Cook newsletter, because
yeah,
it's a good place where to find that kind of news about Google and search and other search engines that you maybe have missed. And that there are other few. Yours is one of them. And how things are going in New Orleans. I've never been there. I mean, I traveled quite a lot in the States and never been in New Orleans. How is
there's a there's a quote that's attributed to Tennessee Williams, and it's there were three cities in America: New York, San Francisco, and New Orleans. Everything else is Cleveland. So New Orleans is one of those cities that if you're coming to America, you should definitely see. And please don't blame us for the rest of the state.
okay. I remember that once there was an SEO event in New Orleans, if I'm not
We
wrong.
before COVID, PubCon actually came here, and we had a number of halls in the convention center, and it was fantastic because we were able to. You can't take your whole team to a remote conference, but when PubCon was here, we sponsored an event. We bought like 10 tickets and kind of rotated people through the sessions that they were interested in. So it was great. I would love it if a proper conference would come back here someday.
And I mean, I think because it's somehow in the center of between the two coasts, it would be maybe easier for everybody instead of having or one conference in the East Coast, one other conference in the West Coast,
Yeah.
and sometimes the same conference duplicated because you have to cover the two
hmm
coasts and the people in behind, in between.
Or
And
I like what Brighton's doing. They're doing two coasts, right? It's just that one is the coast of California and one is the coast of England.
well, I mean, the coast of England, that is the classic Brighton SEO. Some people says that it's still the original experience somehow. And I don't know. I mean, I've never been in the San Diego one, but the Brighton classic Brighton SEO is become even more than just a conference. It's a real, true SEO search. Let's call it search and what are terms happening. So it's
Yep.
times that you don't even spend more time outside talking with friends, making new friends, doing networking, sharing ideas, drinking a lot of beer because obviously we are in the UK also, and then actually staying inside the Congress Center and watching people talking, or maybe I mean, because I know so many people and you go watch them and cheering them, making support as you were in one of the stadium, like in the just concluded FIFA World Championship. And yes, it's a really nice experience, especially for this kind of things surrounding the event. And this is maybe the best of this kind of event. But let's come to you and let's do the classic question that I ask to all my guests. How SEO is treating you lately?
And so, I'm having a renewed love affair with SEO. I've been doing this for a really long time. I put my first website online in the middle '90s. Search influence turned 20 last year, so I've got plenty of reps in SEO. But I tell the story like when I first discovered ChatGPT, I was on a plane flying cross country, and I asked it a stupid question, because I was working, watching videos, and I asked ChatGPT that I'd just gotten access to, what was the beef between Vin Diesel and The Rock, right? And I get this really nice answer, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. I now understand this medium. And so, because I've been making my living with Google for the preceding 20 years, I asked Google the same question, and I got 10 blue links and a job to do. And from that point forward, I knew for a fact that this is where I needed to be spending my energy. And after more than 30 years working online, I'm as excited today about SEO as I ever have been.
So yeah, yes, this is a sensation that a lot of people share with me. It's like, sort of coming back to the both sensation when you were starting with Google SEO. Let's call it Google SEO, and you were no school book about SEO, so you needed to experiment. You needed to burn dozens of domains trying to understand. You were spamming the web like crazy, but not because you were a spammer at heart, but because you needed to understand how things work. It's like when you are a kid and you want to play with something, and sooner or later you're going to break your game in order to understand how it works.
Yeah, there's a fine line between experimentation and spamming, and
Yeah.
try to stay on the good side of that, but you don't know you don't know where the envelope ends unless you test it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yes. It's in fact, I usually say that I don't want to enter in the classic ethical discourse because I don't think that is the correct way to think. It's more about convenience. I mean, it's convenient to do spam tactics, let's call it so tactics that can manipulate search or can manipulate AI answer now at risk for your client to be penalized or banned or something like this. That is the real question where you have to act. If you are doing it, let's call it for experimentation. And I mean, somehow you have to do it. Because if not, just following or accepting the canonical book from the vendors, okay, you can do it. But many times, and I think you agree with all the years of experience you have, but sometimes the best practice is not the best solution in many cases.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I like to treat what we hear from the search engines as a signal,
Hmm.
right? They're not the law, they're not the police, you're not gonna go to jail, but I think that they're good signals. Like recently, you'll remember this in the last month or so, Google updated their webmaster guidelines saying to show up in Google results, you don't need to do any of these fancy things. You don't need to chunk your content or have an LLMs.txt or any of these things, right?
Hmm.
2 weeks earlier, on their dev blog, they published how to build agent-friendly website, which said you should do all of those things. And so to me, it's like, which side do you listen
Yeah,
to?
yeah, yes, I hear you. But in this case, I think there are more grace and nuances to the two things than usually people read at first. I mean, the fact that one thing has been published on the by the Google search team, and one other thing is has been published by the developers, by the core developer team. So more people that are even closer to the Chrome team than truly the search team is telling us that there are at least one important things. But there are two teams doing different things in Google. One is the search team, which is for the classic search, and eventually also for the AI search, and tangentially also for AI mode. So the things that are connected to Google Search Console somehow. And then there is the developer team, the one that is taking care of the agents. And so that there is a third alternative to what is correct. Both are correct. Just that the recommendation for that the search team about AI search are for search, like so. So for search, because AI overview especially, but also AI mode, are directly relying on the index corpus. You don't need to have an LLM TXT. I mean, it's okay. It's the classic thing that you can have it. It's not a bad thing to have it. I mean, it's not going to damage the website, your visibility in classic search. But it somehow sounds like when we were using RedPrep Next, we were convinced, and Google just simply forgot to tell us that it wasn't using it anymore. On the other side, the LLM TXT is needed for agents. It's somehow connected to the well-known subfolder files and so on in order for the agent to understand how things are organized into a website.
I found it particularly telling that Google's Lighthouse, the accessibility and speed testing tool that
Mhm.
they make available, it actually deducts points from your score if you don't have an LLMs.txt file as of about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
But it's correct because the things that some of the hardest, let's say, conservative SEO are forgetting, it still maybe didn't get properly, is that now the user are free. The humans, the bots, and the agents.
Yep.
And so every testing tool must respond how your website is compliant for these free agents. And now, for instance, the fact that if you are not using the LLM TST, it's going to hit you some points of from a 1 to 100 for the agentic experience.
Yeah, and I think arguably, certainly based on my usage, but I think if you look at the way the industry's going, that the agent use case is going to become a lot more prevalent. And I say that like we can look at the, CEO of Google gets up on stage and says the future of search is agentic, which by the way, Mike King said at least 3 years ago. So, you know, Google's a little behind Mike King. But but to me, the issue is when it's in your Siri, when it's in your Google chat, when it's in WhatsApp, right? That's the interface. That's going to become the new search interface, and it's going to be, long queries and agent led. And so if we are not making the agent user journey at least parallel to the human user journey and are thinking about the future of the web, then I think we're going to be falling behind. And that's before you get to the fringe and people are using, OpenClaw and Hermes and that kind of stuff that starts to really mediate their experience of the internet.
Indeed, indeed. And but I think that Google was already thinking in AI and eventually in agentic for many years. If you remember, surely you remember, it was even before COVID. I think it was already around 2018. I think Sundar Pichai was already the CEO of Google. And Google came out with a domain, google.ai. Why? Because I mean, with Bert and then with Mom, it was already, even before with RagBrain, if you think it was already using machine learning, which is the base of AI. And then they invented the transformer and they started to do things. What OpenAI obliged Google was to make these things public, in the sense to make them usable by the end user and not just something that is working in the back end, in the background of Google search. But it was already working in the background of Google search. So if you think it things like even more than the feature snippet, I'm thinking the explosion of people also ask, which is substantially passage ranking. which is substantially chunking, was already there. And then everything started to move very fast, very fast, very fast. And now Google is somehow in this sort of secret war kind of level fight with OpenAI to see who is going to be the most used one. And Google, I think, is following the same step it did with, again, so Apple when it was iOS versus Android.
Right. Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things that I like to remind people. The blog post, the Google Webmaster blog post about the move to the semantic web, strings versus things, 2012. Schema.org, 2014. Tim Berners,
No, Schema.org was even before. Was
I,
even before. I remember a talk of Joan Forrester,
yeah.
2011, presenting when he was still working in Bing, presented Schema.org. So
Well, I
it
know
was.
that I've talked to Dwayne about that, the fact that they were, Bing, Google, Yandex all came together in this format. I'm sure they were talking about it prior, but from what I've seen, I could be wrong. I thought the launch of it was 2014. But then you can go even further back to Tim Berners-Lee and
Yes.
his paper on the semantic web. And I know that you're a fan of semantics, right? His paper on the semantic web was like 2000. So it's been moving in this direction. And this idea, just another thing that I know you're a fan of, is semiotics, right? If you think about the intersection between semiotics, right, sign, symbol, language, kind of at their core, and the way that we're starting to think about the web. You and I talked before you started recording about international SEO. Well, how much easier is international SEO when we're talking about entities rather than words? Because the entities are going to be the same regardless of where you are. So I think that that's a core concept that we should all start thinking more
Yes,
about.
and it's one of the main characteristics of MUM,
Mm-hmm.
as the Times, Cindy Kramer was also telling us. And because the entities, an apple is an apple, no matter whether if you are naming it in Spanish, Italian, in English, or French. There are few things that are, but there are very, very few things that are complicated to translate in terms of entity because they don't exist as an entity in some culture. Like, for instance, certain types of white for us are white, simple white, but for someone in Inuit, there are 50 types of white. So
Right.
how can you transform this, make this matching in terms of entities or sub-entities? But yes, and I think that, yes, I'm a big fan of semiotics also. Yes, I have the fortune to have a Umberto Eco's professor, so that's why I'm a fan of semiotic. And especially it's already entering because one of the big promises of all the LLMs that is that we were going to be multimedia, so multimodal. Then there is also what multimodal really means, if it's more different type of format or something else. But let's say that is a multimodal in terms of presenting not only text, but also videos, also interactive application, the way AI mode is evolving. And in that case, semiotics becoming something really important because we see it for the videos, for instance. Let's say this video that we are recording is a good example. It's a very simple framing divided in two frames so that we can even create, classic vertical video for the show. And
Mhm.
okay, if it was a short, usually when we produce the short for the search session, we usually have the central, in the center is the big face of the person talking, and below or above, and depending on if you are putting above or below is more important or less important, you have a transcription in order for people to read the text without needing to open the audio, especially on mobile. Also, video is moving, and it's now YouTube is fed with Gemini. And Gemini is combining all the free signal, video, text, and audio. And so all the signals are helping creating a stronger context. That's why I think that video and video sources, and that's why Google is so using YouTube, is the best natural language source for information and for creating answer.
Absolutely. When I went through a project and we've done this for clients, but just describing what I did for myself, I wanted to create a voice and tone doc. It was truly representative of how I write and speak. And so I took all of my, I took all of the pre 2023 articles that I had and I fed them in. And then I scraped all of my podcasts and presentations from YouTube to actually get my spoken voice. And so the combination of those two is now this reference document that I use when I'm writing primarily with AI. Or if a team member is writing for me, the first thing that I'll do is they'll hand me the thing that they've written. And before I even read it, I'll pass it through my voice and tone doc and what comes out the other side. And these are folks who've been working with us for years and know what I sound like. They're like, this really sounds like you. So I think that it's a lot, the spoken aspect of it is I think much more important because I think we tend to get a little bit more formal when we write. And I think anybody who knows me knows that I'm a pretty informal person. So I prefer the spoken side.
No, no, but your technique is the same things I did. I recorded all the things I wrote, all the available videos where I speak. And I did the same. I created my brand voice for the LLMs to use because I needed something like this because I'm Italian, live in Spain, and I write and communicate about SEO and I search in English. And SEO and I search are not simple topics to write about. And so if I have so many things to say that if I was following my classic process for writing a single post, and also I'm unfortunately a logorite, I write a lot. And it would have taken 1 month for a single post for me to do it. Because finding the idea, writing down, sometimes making a schema on paper, then translating the schema in a Word document, and then reviewing, and then maybe I would have started in Italian or started in Spanish. It's not a problem for me now after 20 years to jump from Italian or Spanish. But I would have started with both languages and then eventually I've started to localize and refine it in English. So a lot with the same methodology you described. I created substantially the Gianluca Fiorelli writing style Bible. And one of the things that I used Claude for that case. And I told Claude, one of my characteristics, and it would be very strange for people reading me, all of a sudden they don't see any orthographical mistake from me or grammatical mistake from me because I'm not a native English speaking. So at least I must have one mistake. But not because I want to sound natural, but because I want to sound like me. And in doing so, thanks to this, obviously, I write everything like this and then let Claude to make the localization for me. Obviously, then would be crazy if you don't do also the manual checkup in order to see if it's really true to yourself.
Yeah, so I think that that's one of those big enablers, right? I mean, because I'm personally really glad that you write more because I enjoy your writing and I find that I learn a lot from it. So I'm glad that you built that tool for yourself. And I think that we who are native English speakers are a little bit spoiled because the rest of the world tends to come to us, in our language. So that's neither here nor there, but I do feel a little bit spoiled in that regard. But I think that that technique, the having identified the voice and tone, whether it's for ourselves or for a client or a brand, means that we can now be more present in all of the places where the AI machines are looking. Because if there's one thing, that I believe, it is that the only way to win AI search is by being ubiquitous. And you look at the data, right? And it shows that between the LLMs, there are like 73% of the sources or something are different from one to another. And even within the Google surfaces, I pulled this stat for my last SMX Advanced presentation. Even within the Google surfaces, there's only 20% correlation across the references that they cite, AI mode, Gemini, and AI overviews. And so if there's one thing that I think we need to get comfortable with, it's content repurposing and this idea of developing my brand, developing all of my brand assets, and then building a machine to turn those into appropriate content for each of these places is is one of the ways that I think we get closer to using AI.
And it's not just, I think, a matter of the diversity of sources used by LLMs. I think Google, again, in this case, with the explosion of a search feature, was already telling us where search we're going. I mean, one of the classic tropes of today's is classic search is the 10 blue link. And I wonder about why. It is not anymore the 10 blue links, at least since Universal Search. And Universal Search was 2010.
Right.
When with the explosion of a zero click, so the increase of search feature on a side, all the business reason why Google exploded all this feature for its own interest. But all these features were telling us that there is video, there is short, there is forum and discussion and forum blog, there is the top news if you are in the news, there is images, yeah, and so on and so on and so on. So you already needed to pay attention to all the verticals.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't anymore a matter, and yes, until LLMs, until AI, or in the case of Google, the CTR was still very strong for classic organic search, but it was diminishing. And I mean, if you wanted to be, and there is a lot of talking about how much is important for a brand to be visible. It was important also in classic search. Classic search is feeding the memory of
Right.
people that eventually are going to come from LLM search and then going to Google or vice versa to retain your brand. If your brand is just a tiny search snippet, maybe they are not going to remember you. But if you are appearing with a video, you're appearing with image, you're appearing cited in a discussion and forum, you appear also, and when we scroll and open the people also ask and so on and so on and so on, then your brand is going to be imprinted in the brain of a user.
Right. And so I think it's about I went back and forth with Lily Ray on this. I don't recall if it was in person or in comments somewhere, but I said, you've got to be present. She said, no, you've got to be famous. And I just, because I needed to skyscraper her, I said, no, you've got to be ubiquitous. You've got to be everywhere all the time that a user is looking for the thing. It brings me back to, there was Condé Nast, the magazine group that publishes Condé Nast and Vogue, et cetera. Their CEO got on stage somewhere in the last several months and said, imagine we live in a world where there is no Google, where Google sends us no more traffic, kind of responding to the zero click challenge. And in a world where Google sends zero clicks, and you know that the only way that you're going to be able to influence the outcome is to be present in all these places, would it also be great if those places gave you some traffic? So I'm working with a publisher right now, and they work in a lot of lifestyle and recipe brands, and they get a tremendous amount of traffic from Pinterest, right? And if you want to talk about, and this is one of the things we're working on, is, okay, we know we do well on Pinterest. How could we scale that? And it's all their own unique, original, human created content that we now need to load into the AI surfaces so that they're everywhere for that content. So more
I'm
Pinterest.
sure you're surely, because of his client, you surely are super interested in how Google is just evolved Google image.
Yeah.
And it's fun because Google always copied Pinterest. Back in the days, Pinterest was the first one having the tags,
Yep.
for filtering, which, and I don't know if you agree with me, it's one of the best way to do a very quick entity search about something, because
Yep.
they are entities or attributes of a entity you're searching for.
I think anytime they give you a disambiguation mechanism, right? So even in local search right now, I don't know if you're seeing this in Europe, but in local search, they're now adding in this layer of like known for,
Oh, yes.
like, and so there are the little tills that you can click on to resort. And so if Google's showing you those, that's probably a good indicator that you should include them in your content or your self-reference. Just like on image search, the various facets of the image search are probably related to entities as Google understands it.
No,
So,
no, no, no. But in fact, and in this sense, I was very lucky because Italy, Google.it, when we still had Google.it do the regional TLDs for Google, it was a testing country for Google for image search for these things. And it was even better in the very beginning because they were testing not just to put the tags, but the tags were just text and we weren't any image. We have a very small miniature representative of the entity of the tags or the attribute. But it was just text and blocks and colored. And so you see substantially a sort of embedding maps between entities because the entities that were related to them were a different shade, for instance, of red. Another group of entities related to the main entities were maybe in blue, but because they were not related to the ones, but related to the main. So it was even better in this kind for doing this kind of searches. And returning to this, to the Pinterest and Google image, so Pinterest was using already, and Google copied. Then Pinterest came out with the object recognition, and Google copied it. And then Google went all alone and started with Lens, circle to search, and now. And one of the things that maybe you will find more interesting is that Google has pushed even further in front of the user the collection part of image, which is something that also the user usually don't know that because Google was very stupid and never really pushed it, but now it's pushing it because you can save this image as you were scrolling Pinterest on mobile. You can save that in this collection. You can create your substantially pin boards,
yeah,
Pinterest board in Google Image. They are saved. And because of personalization, maybe we can now start talking about the problem of personalization also in terms for agentic search. This is going to feed even more the personalization of search.
yeah, this is one of the, as I'm sure you feel the same way, but as you get to be a certain age, you start thinking more in metaphors, right? And
Mm.
I know that there's a lot of concern about personalization, but forever I've been saying about any analytics that they're wrong, right? We know they're wrong. Google Analytics is a sampling, Search Console only goes back so far. And so I like to think of any of those tracking tools as more of a windsock, like at an airport, a windsock versus a GPS. I agree that personalization should be some marginal concern, but I think that you can look at which way the wind is blowing universally and still have a good idea of how that should affect your optimization, content creation, channel selection, all that.
Yes, I think that, and maybe because it coming from my experience as background as an international SEO, and so depending on the market, one thing could result in a different type of SERP results than, for instance, in Google.com US. Um, I think that the case of personalization is really strong, but it's more a strategic thing that we have to consider in order to, okay, so if we, search is going to be very personalized, so we must be, as a brand, we must be really good and able to talk exactly to persona, let's call them so, that we are targeting. And not just the generic persona, but a nuanced persona, because inside a big definition of one persona, let's say a demographic between like our age, there are many different types of, even if they like the same thing, there are different types of super persona. So being able to craft your content, being able to target all this kind of nuance, this is more strategic than practical because the other big difference is that, okay, even before when you wanted to have some statistical correctness about the data, you needed to obtain a huge amount of data. The problem is that now it's even bigger, the kind of data. I don't know if you remember, if you saw it, the proposal coming in, how to do correctly prompt tracking. It was saying not just tracking one prompt, the same prompt every week, but do track that prompt 20 times in the same hour in order to have the biggest range of potential variation of of answer for the same prompt. And eventually, after 2 weeks or after 1 month, do the same in order to see if something changed.
Yeah, which I think is, I don't know how much time you spend in Google Search Console, but I'm starting to see evidence of that behavior because you'll see, first, I thought it might be query fan out, but what I think it is now is prompt tracking because you'll see how does X do A? How does X do B? How does X do C? How does X do D, right? And just you'll see a stack of those types of questions in Search Console, which to me say, maybe we want to lighten up a little bit on the query tracking tools, the prompt tracking tools. But I also think that, back to my assertion that it's a windsock versus a GPS, I hate the idea of running the same prompt 20 times. I know it's probabilistic, right? I love having this conversation with normies because they
Mm.
don't get it, right? They go to ChatGPT or whatever, and they're like, oh, this is just like Google. And I'm like, no, it's very much not like Google because it's probabilistic. It's not deterministic. Even in the AI overview in Google, there is a right answer for each of the assertions, right? Whereas in an AI surface where the backend is an LLM, not grounded in retrieval, it's just, I think it's Mark Williams Cook who described it as spicy autocomplete.
Yes.
And so my favorite example these days is, why did the chicken cross the Atlantic? It's not going to happen, right? You're never going to see that unless I say it enough that it makes it into the corpus. But the right answer is always going to be, why did the chicken cross the road? And so this is where for me, like, I don't get why they're saying do the searches 20 times in a row, see what you get. But I just think that that's it, it gives you, there's a saying for this, but there's a, it's like information divorced from context. It's data for its own sake. And I don't think it necessarily tells you how to address the user intent, the user needs, and all that kind of stuff, which to me is vastly more important. Is if you can be present for the persona, be present for the persona at their time of intent, then that's a much more winning
And
stance.
there is one thing that I think that I actually miss. And I mean, we are hosted by Advanced Web Ranking, which is also has its own.
And
Uh,
and we're and
uh,
we're and we're a client for 20 years, right? So we're fans.
oh, they also started. I think that they have quite good tools for also AI search and so on and so on, especially to connect it with the classic search, which is something that other tools, geo native tools don't have.
Right.
But I miss something that I was already missing before LLMs. Before LLMs, I was missing, okay, we have this tracking and we track how we are visible for this keyword or this query, but we don't have any tools telling us what are the other queries that Google is suggesting through query refinement within the same SERP we are ranking for. And doing this manually is a really a pita because you have to scrape substantially the Google SERP and then tracking this refined query to see if you are visible in the escape way that Google is suggesting to users. So, because one of the things conceptual things I don't like of zero-click SERP is that usually zero-click SERP is considering the landing SERP when you're doing a search and you are landing on the SERP result. Actually, we should think in zero-click session. Is the session not generating any kind of click? The answer is yes, it's zero-click session. If the answer is no, because I'm entering Google at the time and I was clicking on a topic filter on a YouTube search results in a related search, in something else, in one of the many query refinement that were opening, and it was happening also in AI or not happening anymore. The gray links were query refinement opening a new SERP. And I wanted to know if I was visible in that new SERP. And now it's the same with the AI answer. They are telling me that I'm visible, maybe with my brand,
Mhm.
both with a mention or a citation, with a link or not a link for that answer. But I want to know if I'm visible for the follow-up question that all the LLMs are proposing at the end of the answer.
Yeah. I think that this is like, so this is really, it's really interesting and it ties into this query fan out idea of it's not just the query or the prompt.
Exactly.
It's all of the queries and prompts that follow. And back to the idea of people also ask, there's a bit of a mapping, at least visually, between people also ask and the query fan out. And this is one of the cool things. I feel like we're a commercial for Mark Williams Cook today, but he has this tool, also asked, which is available by API, and it'll show you for each of the people also asked questions, all of the fans out from there. And one of the things I find really interesting is it'll tell you which of those people also ask questions now returns an AI overview, right? So it's very, I mean, like you can get pretty deep on this stuff, but this idea of what does Google think is relevant, and you just made something occur to me, which is we might want to stop calling it zero click because there's a lot of clicking going on. It's just that clicking is staying with Google, right? It's zero exit search, right? And this is where the data
Well,
that
that's why I mean, this is not just me. It's something that it came out first in the Italian SEO community that we were talking back in the years, back in the days that, well, it's not the click is not maybe the best definition. The definition is search, is the session,
yeah,
because the search is a session of search. We never really did. I mean, obviously, if we are searching for a very quick answer, it's just one search. But when we are searching, for instance, let's say we are searching for buying a new car, it is not just one search. It's one search, and from there refining it and searching it. Once, yes, it was a lot more clicking because we were clicking and then returning to Google search.
right.
Now, Google search and the LLMs are pushing us to continue the session inside. So that's why it's so important, as you were saying before, to be visible not only everywhere in the same answer, in the same SERP, but everywhere. What was the title of that movie that also won the Oscar?
Well, everything, everywhere, all at once, or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like that title of that movie. You have to be always constantly be visible. And that's why there are so many people saying we don't need to spend any more time in creating informational content. And such a mistake for me.
yeah. So this is like the revolution for me over the last couple of years has been that when I'm looking for a solution and there's not an answer, I go to the tools. Originally, it was make.com and N8N, and
Hmm.
so I built in make.com probably 2 years ago. I built a questions tool, and it so with the URL of one of our clients and a query, it goes into Google Search Console, looks for question-related searches. It goes to SEMrush API, looks for questions and related, and then it goes to the also asks API and gets the expansion of those prompts, queries. And it's really cool, but it's a little bit esoteric and it doesn't necessarily work into a workflow. But the other thing that I built was something that I called the ontologizer.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah, yes. I
and
was
it's
going to ask you for this.
yeah, so the ontologizer, the problem I was trying to solve for is originally I wanted to look at entity salience and then the presence of entities on a given page. And so the first piece of it that I built was, extracting the entities using the OpenAI API to extract the entities from a page and then connect them as it could to Wikipedia, Wikidata, etc. And then from there, I was like, well, that's interesting. That would probably be helpful for creating schema. And so it auto generates schema. Is it perfect? No. But then the final piece that I plugged in, and I blame Metahen. Metahen Yesflirt, he shared a repository in which he did a query fan out expression. And so I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to steal that. I've told him, he knows it's not, theft, it's more inspiration. And so the ontologizer, first it extracts the entities, tries to identify the primary entity. Then it gives you an idea of what good schema might look like for that, good connected schema. And then it shows you the query fan out and how well the page covers each of those. And so it's on a page by page basis. But where I see the real value is when we start to like map this across the whole website and its offsite references, right? Because that's where, back to this idea of you got to be, everything everywhere all at once, is if I can start to map the query fan outs to all of the places where I have presence, all the places where I've been able to distribute my content, that then becomes really interesting to me. And I think that's where, in a world where Google's not going to send me traffic anymore, that becomes, I think, the new, the new old face of SEO, if you will.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And let's talk about, because you're talking about the tools that you are creating, and you also said in the really beginning you are more prone to be of the technical side of the work. So ACO, I mean, we love all the tools. That's true.
Right.
If a tool is very well done, it's making our life so easy. But sometimes, as I was saying before, because we are such a creative people, sometimes we need to have, we create our own tool, which is essentially a sort of patchwork of all the things we are seeing in other tools. And okay, before was quite complicated, but it was doable. You can do it using, Python, using API, using combining things from different data streams. The big problem was with different naming of the same things that usually tools have. But now with things like Clo, Code, Codex, anti-gravity, people who are totally inept, because I'm not, absolutely not a person coming from the technical side of the computer science. I'm coming from the content side of a balance. Even an inept like me is able to create something. Nothing that can be commercially usable or nothing that can be even shared because it's just work for me. But tell about how you rediscover.
I want you to share it. I want to see what you're creating, Gianluca. It's
Um,
cool.
well, I'm going to share today. We are recording. It's what it is. It's the 21st of July, and tomorrow, 22nd of July, I'm going to participate in a SEO charity online conference, and I will present. It's not a tool because I decided not to transform it into a tool, but it's a very elaborated prompt. That type work with tooling in order to make it perfect for me. And it works. It works so great. So tomorrow I'm presenting a fictional case study and share all the prompts for people to watch it, to use, to copy, use them, make it even better. If I want, I don't think it works with skills, transforming it with skill, but because using skill is somehow resetting always the context for me. And but people want to transform it in a set of skills or to even more automatize the process I use for creating content or for updating content, especially. I'm going to share it. But this is a very, very rare things I'm doing because I'm maybe call it imposter syndrome. I'm not so. I see so many good at them, like yours. I mean, explain how you rediscovered and the pleasure of creating your own stuff, your tooling.
Part of it was that I wanted a more simple answer to a lot of questions than you get from the traditional tools. You go to a SEMrush, Ahrefs, et cetera. And it was kind of like my experience with ChatGPT versus Google is they give me all of this data, but it doesn't necessarily give me answers. And so what I wanted to create, and I think I can't remember when I created it. I created this site grader, and it was, I wanted to be able to answer the question of how is this site doing on a number of factors without having to go into 4 different tools and pull all those things out. And then the other thing that I was trying really hard to do was to make it completely free. So it doesn't use API, it doesn't use AI tokens. So I iterated until I was able to simulate programmatically the kinds of answers that I was getting from Claude in an AI answer. So really for me, the building of the tools is I either want a quicker answer or I want to distill the information. I've described myself as, post UI because I don't want your UI. It's like, yeah, upgrade your UI all you want. Just give me the API. Because if I have the API, I can do whatever I want with it. And I had this crazy experience where I'm using podcasts in a couple of projects and publishing them through BuzzStream. And so I'm sitting in the car, I'm in the passenger seat, my wife is driving, and I was trying to figure out if I could publish directly to BuzzStream from these audio files we were creating. And of course, they're automatically generated audio files, right? And so I went to Claude Code and I said, hey, and this is the way I talk to Claude Code. I said, hey, does BuzzStream have an API? And it goes out and it thinks about it for a minute and says, why, yes, it does. These are the things you need. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. I don't have all those things. I have this audio file and I have this Word doc. And so Claude looks at my audio file and my Word doc and says, no problem. And then publishes it direct to BuzzStream. So now, to me, that's where I get so energized. It's like, I have this job to do and the tools can make it so much easier. And they can remove that like data overload, too many choices kind of thing that I think we often have in the traditional tools, where I can say, this is the thing that I need to get done. Now let's figure out how to hook it up. Like I created for our content team a process to create a first draft for client content. And so the first thing it does is it does query fan out, right? And determines what are the, to our point of what are the machines looking for. And then the next thing it does is it does research and assembles it into something original. So within one piece of content, you're addressing the query fan out challenge, and you're also potentially addressing the challenge of information gain. So you've got your information gain, you got your query fan out, and then you've got your, really nice semantic chunking. And then the human being comes behind and says, does this conform to what I understand about the client? And
Mhm.
so,
Yes,
so it's,
my prompt is essentially something similar. I use
yeah,
it. In fact, one of the things that I'm going to explain is that the problem is not AI slope. The AI slope is not generated by AI, but it's generated by human using correctly AI to
right.
create content. And so it's AI slope is start even before the first word is written. And I dedicate a big part of a presentation, which is just 20 minutes, to the data preparation for
Mhm.
AI to work on in order to strategize the content. And then after a conversation, that is mandatory stop, a conversation with the writer in order to create the perfect outline. And from there, once the outline has been refined, creating the content chunk by chunk. And the chunk
Right.
by chunk is H2 to H2.
Yeah. And hopefully in kind of a question capsule format. So you're,
Well, in this case, I'm not so rigid because I think if everybody's doing the same style, question and answer, we are creating new commodity, and it's a format commodity. It's boring, sincere. As someone coming from content, I also see the view of the people writing things. I have still people that are saying, okay, you can using this prompt, you can create this brief that can be used for co-creating stuff with AI, but please give me also the brief as if I wasn't using AI, because in some cases, I prefer to be just myself writing this. I know all the things that your teacher taught us about how you have to write things in order to be readable for humans and understandable for search engines and bots and AI LLMs. But sometimes I think because there is a space that must be still given to, especially for certain kind of content, to poor creativity and let's call it a rhetoric. So yes, I agree. There are parts that you can decide, okay, this specific part of this content of these landing pages should be considered in the format of question and answer. But these other parts, just important is that they are well structured, not a classic wall of text, but well structured using paragraph, monosemantic paragraph about just one thing and so on and so on and so on. And that's fine. I mean, sometimes I think it's like in the beginning, in the really early years of SEO, when something like SEO copywriting was a thing, we scared the shit out of journalists and copywriters. We were rigid, how rigid we were. And I fear that many are going to do the same thing now for writing for AI.
Yeah, and I think that there's still a value for the humans and for the machines in some element of storytelling. So I do believe that there's value in prose if it's consistent with the search intent. Um,
Obviously. If
but
it's
what I
just a rhetoric, obviously it's not.
Yeah. What I find funny is a lot of the same things that we talk about as being good for AI content. If you go way back in the day to there was one big like web copywriting website. There's a lot of the same stuff. Bulleted list, short paragraphs, right? Make it easy to read. And we keep rediscovering these things over
Also,
time as
because at the end
you
of the
change.
day, we are talking of LLM as something, okay, then we go into mathematics, causing similarity, chamfer, all this kind of calculation, because that's how a machine must translate things. But at the end of the day, we are talking about natural language processing. And the keyword is natural language.
Yes, yes, and I think that when we get all the way down to cosine similarity, we've probably gone too far for most of the websites that we work with, right? It's still much more about, are we addressing the search intent? Are we creating the kind of content that's going to resonate with the user or the robot that they've dispatched? And once we get down to vector mapping our entire site, then we may have gone too far.
Yes, it's something like somehow changing the phrase when everything is exceptional, nothing is exceptional, but rephrasing this phrase is too much optimization is no optimization.
Yeah, totally agree. That's a great closing line, Gianluca. Too much optimization is no optimization.
And close it here because 1 hour and 5 minutes. It has been a fast because I didn't notice the time right now until now, but it's very long episode. So let's stop it here. But before you are from Nashville, and let's do some kind of information gain touristic spot trailer for your city. What are the things people should see that nobody is talking about? The
People
things
should.
that you like.
Yeah. So I will. So one of the things that I will always do when somebody comes to town is I'll take them to a restaurant outside the French Quarter.
Mm.
Because when people think of New Orleans, they think of the old quarter. So I'll take them to, we have a jewel called City Park, and it's acres and acres. And there's a restaurant right on the edge of City Park. That's one from one of the great New Orleans restaurant families, the Brennan's family, and it's Ralph's on the Park. And so Zeph Snap, who you may know by name,
Oh yeah,
he was in
know it
town.
personally too.
I picked him up and I took him to Ralph's on the Park because it was very much off the beaten path. And the other thing that I like to tell people, if the weather's right, is rent a bike, because New Orleans has a big reputation, but it's actually a pretty small city. So
Mhm.
you can see a big part of the city in a couple of hours on a bike that if you were doing it by car or on foot would not be nearly as accessible. Those are my 2 bits of information gained about New
Now
Orleans.
is the hurricane season, or how it's going to be?
It
'Cause
is. We have a tropical storm in the Gulf right now named Bertha, but it doesn't appear that she's going to have too much impact.
yes, it would be horrible to see an experience like what was 2005, right?
Oh, yeah, no, that's not. We don't want to do that again.
No,
Uh,
I don't wish
we
it.
yeah.
Thank you, Will. It was a great pleasure to finally have you here at the third session. And yes, off the record, we reminded when we met up in real life at a popcorn. Let's see if we will have occasion to meet up again in real life too.
Yeah, we definitely
But
got to make that happen. Thank you for inviting me, Gianluca. I really appreciate it.
you're welcome. You're welcome. And thank to all of you for having the passions to support, to stand out, talking about all these things until now. And remember, let me do the YouTuber influencer. Subscribe to the channel. Let make this channel grow. And ring on the bell to be notified when new episodes of a search session are going to be published. Thank you and bye-bye.